This video might ruffle some feathers. Because today I am reacting to viral TikTok books. And I know that some of these, if not all of these books, have a very loyal fan base. And I know that people hold books very close to their hearts. So take what I say today with a grain of salt. Everyone is allowed to have their opinions. Just because I don't love a book, it doesn't mean that you can't love it. It doesn't mean it can't be your favorite. And by the same token, just because I love a book doesn't mean that you have to love it. So keep that in mind and just enjoy this video. It's all for fun, you guys. With that being said, let's just jump right in. Let's start off this video with a bang. Normal People. Normal People is the story of mutual fascination, friendship, and love. It takes us from that first conversation to the years beyond, in the company of two people who try to stay apart but find that they can't. This book follows two characters, Connell and Marianne, basically from high school up until post-grad. A lot of people love this book. I'm not one of them. This book made me physically angry, and I'm one that I don't really get angry with characters. If I don't like characters, then I just brush them off, but these two main characters in this book literally made me so mad. I thought I was going to enjoy the concept of this book, and I still think I could enjoy a similar concept, maybe from a different author, or maybe if the concept involved a different plot line. I just couldn't see past the miscommunication between the two main characters. I feel like their lives would have been a lot easier had they just been upfront with one another regarding their feelings. I understand why people love it. I just don't like it, and I couldn't see past the miscommunication. I can't sit here and lie and say that I enjoyed this book when I didn't. So I gave this book a 1 out of 5 stars. I don't even think I finished it, if I'm being honest. Let's talk about a book that I absolutely loved. One of Us's line is basically about a group of high school students who end up in detention. One of them never makes it out of detention. He ends up dying. The rest of the group is actually being framed for his murder. They're not friends, but they have to join forces to try to figure out who murdered this student and to clear their names. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. It was almost a 5-star read for me. I absolutely loved every minute that I spent reading this book. I loved all the main characters, but specifically Nate and Bronwyn. They have my heart. I really like that in this book you get the point of view of all the main characters. So you get the point of view of Bronwyn, Addie, Nate, and Cooper. They basically all have secrets, which you find out as you read. And then I did not see the end coming. The end was a twist, and I absolutely loved the twist. There's actually a show based on this book. I think it airs on Peacock, and Netflix, I believe, acquired the rights to season 2. I'm not 100% sure on that. I did watch it. It had some similarities to the book, but there was also a lot of things that weren't in the book that were made specifically for the show, which I thought was interesting. I enjoyed the book more, but the series was just as good. And despite it being a little thick, I actually flew through this book because I did not want to put it down. 100% recommend it, and I give it a 4 out of 5 stars. If you have been watching my channel for a hot minute, then you know that one of my favorite authors at the moment is Colleen Hoover. But that's not to say that I've enjoyed every book that I read from her. I've had some hits, and I've also had some misses, 2 which are included in today's video. The first book that was a miss for me was November 9. I know this book is so popular. Before I read November 9, I heard a lot about it. I just couldn't get behind the plot of this book. This book basically follows Ben and Fallon, and they basically meet in person once a year for 24 hours. Honestly, less than 24 hours if you include the hours that they spend traveling to get to one another. And they have no communication with each other for the rest of the year. They don't share social medias, they don't text, they don't call, they don't FaceTime, none of that. They are basically MIA throughout the whole year except for that one day. That's what bugged me the most. There was a couple other things that bugged me in this book that I can't really say without spoiling the plot, and I don't want to spoil the plot for you guys in case you haven't read this book. There were just things in this book that I was like, really? I don't ever see that happening in real life. Like, I understand romance books are supposed to be fiction, like they're not based on real life or real events. I understand that, but I still like my books to be a little bit bit realistic, because if they're not, I just can't connect with them unless it's like a fantasy book. I still enjoyed the book. The format that it was written in was refreshing. The plot had potential. I just couldn't get past how unrealistic this book was and how unrealistic the characters were. I gave November 9 3 out of 5 stars, and I still stand by it, but I feel like Colleen Hoover has so many other books that are way better than November 9. Since we're on the topic of Colleen Hoover, we must talk about another fan favorite, and that is Confess. This is another Colleen Hoover book that I gave 3 out of 5 stars. This book basically follows two main characters, Auburn and Owen. They both have secrets, and they're both keeping these secrets from one another. Halfway through the book, if I remember correctly, they find out what they're hiding from one another. And unfortunately, Owen's secrets can have really negative consequences on Auburn's life and on what she's trying to accomplish in this book, which again, I can't say what it is because I don't want to spoil it. I will say that I really enjoyed the plot. I thought the plot was refreshing, and I enjoyed the confessions that were sprinkled throughout the book. So all the confessions that you read in this novel are true confessions that were submitted to Colleen Hoover by her readers, and I thought that was really cool. I've never seen an author do that before, and some of these confessions were spicy, you guys. It made me feel like I live a boring life because the drama behind these confessions, I was like, wow, intense to say the least. Honestly, not a bad book. I just personally could not connect with the two main characters, which is why it was hard for me to finish this book. I read this book during a 24-hour reading challenge, which I'll have the video linked down below if you guys want to check it out. If I hadn't read it during that video, I probably would have walked away from this book and not finish it. I was a little bit bored, if I'm being honest, and I didn't want you guys to think that I hate Colleen Hoover, because I don't. I love a lot of her books. The most recent book that I absolutely fell in love from Colleen Hoover was Reminders of Him. When I read this book, my heart broke, but by the end of it, Colleen Hoover put my heart back together. This book follows two main characters, Kenna and Ledger. This book starts off with Kenna being released from prison after serving 5 years, and her main goal is to get her daughter back and be able to be in her daughter's life. Ledger is the one person who is willing to hear Kenna out and to try to understand the events that landed her in jail. I love the writing. I love the two main characters. I even love the side characters. I felt like Colleen Hoover was schooling me in some parts of this book. Such a beautiful story that has so many lessons that you can apply to real life. I also really like that this book is told from the two main characters' point of view, so it's told by Kenna and Ledger. I love reading books that have the two main characters' point of view. It just makes the book a lot more entertaining. It makes me feel invested in the two main characters, and it also makes the book fly by. I read this book in one sitting because I did not want to put it down. The ending of this book, oh my god, my heart, it was just so wholesome, so lovely. I do have to warn you guys that this book is quite heavy, at least it was for me. It talks heavily about death and grief, so if that is something that would be a trigger for you, I would say not to read it. But again, absolutely loved every second that I read this book. It was so freaking good. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I also think this is one of her newest release. It came out this year, if I'm not mistaken. It came out in January. So if you haven't read this book, highly recommend. Definitely one of my top 5 favorites from Colleen Hoover. See you guys? I love Colleen Hoover. It's just those two books that I could not get behind. Another book that I recently read and fell in love with was The Spanish Love Deception. Basically, this book follows two main characters, Catalina and Aaron. Catalina needs a date to her sister's wedding that is taking place in Spain, but she's single, she's not dating anyone, she hasn't dated in a very long time. Her family thinks that she is going to die alone because they haven't seen her with anyone in years. For that reason, Catalina doesn't want to show up to her sister's wedding dateless, and she's willing to take anyone, and that includes her colleague Aaron, who is basically, in Catalina's words, an asshole. She doesn't like him, she thinks that he doesn't like her, but they come up with this arrangement, so he ends up going with her to her sister's wedding. Sparks fly, things happen, and they end up falling for one another. So it's like an enemies to lovers type of book. I gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars. That's how much I loved it. I can see myself rereading this book for years to come. It was so wholesome. I loved that it was a rom-com, so it had me laughing throughout the book. Overall, it's just a feel-good book. I know that some people found this book to be a little slow, especially in the first half. I did notice that it was a little slow, but it didn't bother me. I still really enjoyed the plot and all the characters, specifically Aaron. Aaron has my heart. I love the scenery, I loved the culture, and I loved the Spanish phrases thrown throughout this book. I felt like I was hearing a story being told from like my cousin. The sense of family and unity that was spoken in this book, I just loved every second of it. I feel like if you're Latina, you can relate to Catalina a lot because marriage is heavily important to your parents and to your grandparents, so I could honestly understand Catalina's hesitation to show up to her sister's wedding without a date, especially once you learn the reason why she left Spain in the first place. So again, absolutely love this book, highly recommend, 5 out of 5 stars. Yes, it's a little slow in the beginning, but if you just keep reading and stick with it, I promise it gets better, and I just love this book so much. Another book that I think is severely overhyped is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. I know that so many people are going to disagree with me, but I'm sorry. I just think this book is so overhyped and I don't understand why. This book basically follows Pip, and she is in her senior year. So for her senior capstone project, she decides to look into a murder that happened in her town 5 years prior. And while she researches this murder and she starts her own investigation, she realizes that the person that the police deemed guilty could actually be innocent. That puts her in danger because there is someone in her town that wants her to stop looking for answers and to just walk away from the case, and will do everything in their power to make sure that the truth doesn't come to light. Here's the thing. I love the main character, Pip. I love how she is her own person. She doesn't really need anyone to come rescue her. She believes in following the truth regardless where it may lead her. She was badass. Her character was so refreshing to read. I honestly have no complaints regarding Pip. My main issue with this book is that the ending was so predictable. I was able to predict the ending before I finished the book. So when I got to the ending, I was like, really? I was right? I didn't want to be right. I hate when I can predict the ending of books because it makes me feel like I wasted my time reading the story. And I promise I stayed away from spoilers. Had I not been able to guess the ending, I probably would have given this book a 4 out of 5 stars. It's a good book, but I just don't think it's anything out of this world. I feel like there are a lot of other books that are better than this one. I honestly haven't read the other books in the series. Let me know in the comments below if you think I should. Should I give this series a second chance? Let's talk about a book that I absolutely loved, and that is The Love Hypothesis. It basically follows two main characters, Olive and Adam. Olive is a PhD student. Adam is a grad school professor. They start to fake date to please Olive's friend Anne. Feelings start to emerge. They start to fall for one another, but they can't really figure out if what they're feeling for each other is real or if it's just them fake dating very well. This is fake dating, but it's also a I hate everyone but you type of book, and I enjoy those types of books so much. Absolutely love this book. This book was so freaking cute. The main character Olive did frustrate me a little bit at certain parts of this book, but other than that, I honestly fell in love with Olive and Adam. I think they're so cute together. Their love story is so beautiful. It had the right amount of love, the right amount of spiciness, the right amount of comedy, and 10 out of 10, honestly. When I first did my review on this book, I think I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars, but I'm changing that and I'm giving a 5 out of 5 stars because this is a book that I still think about, and I read it months ago. I'm literally letting time pass so I can kind of forget about certain things in this book and then reread it because I absolutely love this book. I would do anything to read this book again for the first time. I just loved every second of it. If you are in a reading slump and you want a book to jumpstart your reading again, check this book out, read it. Even if you're not into romance, give this book a try. I promise you it will melt your heart and you'll love it so much. Another book that I loved was The Deal by Elle Kennedy. Now this is part of Elle Kennedy's off-campus series. I've read the majority of the books in that series. I think I have one book left to read, and it's The Legacy, the final book. And I think that this is the best book in the series. Absolutely fell in love with the two main characters, Garrett and Hannah. The other books were good, but this one was just like 10 out of 10 for me. This book follows college students Garrett and Hannah. Hannah is basically the perfectionist. She wants to get A's in her classes. She doesn't really have time to date anyone. And Garrett is the star hockey player of their college. He needs Hannah to help him pass a class, I believe it's philosophy, in order for him to be able to keep playing hockey. Hannah is hesitant, but once Garrett makes a deal with her to get her crush to notice her, she agrees. And throughout the tutoring process, Garrett actually ends up falling for Hannah. Now he has to prove to Hannah that he is the guy for her, not this guy that she's been crushing on the whole semester. This book does tackle sexual assault, so if that is a trigger for you, I would say to skip out on this book. But other than that, again, absolutely loved this book. Absolutely loved Garrett's character, Hannah's character. And I really enjoyed that in this book you get to hear Garrett's and Hannah's point of view. You really are able to get into their minds and understand them equally. It is quite spicy, so keep that in mind. If you're not into spice or if you are a young reader, don't read this. And finally, my last book, thank God, because my camera is about to die, The Honeymooners. This book follows Olive and Ethan. Olive has a twin sister who is getting married. Unfortunately, on her twin sister's wedding day, the whole wedding party gets food poisoning, so her sister can't go to her honeymoon with her husband, and because of that, her twin sister begs Olive to go on the honeymoon trip for her so that the trip isn't wasted. The groom does the exact same thing with his brother. The only problem is that Olive hates Ethan and Ethan hates Olive, so they have to figure out how to enjoy this all-inclusive honeymoon trip without getting on each other's nerves. I just enjoyed this book so much. It had the right amount of spice, the right amount of comedy. It was such a cute little rom-com. I loved the scenery. As I was reading this book, I kept wishing that I was in Hawaii, and I still to this day want to book a trip to go to Hawaii and see the beautiful islands because this book inspired me so much. The scenery, the descriptions of everything was just 10 out of 10. I think I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars, but honestly it could be a 5-star read. I'm just very selective with my 5 stars, but I absolutely enjoy this book so much, and I highly recommend that if you haven't read this book, definitely go read it. I fell in love with Christina Lauren's writing in this book. I'm actually about to start her other book. I think it's called Love in Other Words. I've heard so many great things about that book, so I'm so excited to start it, and I'll definitely let you guys know my thoughts on that book, but definitely read this one and you'll love it, I promise. Let me know in the comments below if you agree or disagree with everything that I said. Again, take my opinions with a grain of salt. Just because I didn't enjoy a book doesn't mean that you can't enjoy it, and just because I enjoyed it doesn't mean that you're going to completely fall in love with that same book. We're all allowed to have different opinions, and these are just my opinions on these very popular TikTok books. Either way, I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. I would love to have you a part of my channel, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye guys.